What do you do when it feels like the world around you is exploding and you still have to go in and teach your class? If you're watching this video right now, chances are this is the problem you're trying to solve. You know you have to go into school and teach your kids what they need to know for the future. And yet the future feels completely uncertain. You'll notice that I'm not referencing any specific current event in this video. That's because I've been working with teachers for nearly 2 decades, which is why I can tell you that whatever is on the news right now, which we can all assume is a total shit show, this is neither the first nor the last time that teachers have felt that the world was going to pieces around them. One of my courses for teachers is called Managing Your Emotional Rubber Band. And one of the hardest times to manage your emotional rubber band is when the future feels uncertain. Uncertainty is such an exhausting emotion. Why? Because the human mind has evolved to try to prepare for the future. In fact, there's a habit researcher named Judson Brewer who says that anxiety works in many of the same ways as addiction. It's almost like an addiction to feeling prepared. He says that we're constantly using whatever information is around us to build mental models of what the future is likely to be like. Obviously, this is always imperfect. Nobody can actually predict the future, or at least nobody I know can predict the future. But often, we feel like we have a pretty good grasp of what tomorrow is going to look like. Otherwise, how could you ever sit down and write a lesson plan? So now, what happens during times of uncertainty? Suddenly, we feel like we don't have enough information to make that basic mental model of the future. Our brains end up running on this kind of mental hamster wheel. We're using that planning energy, but we don't know where to direct it. Instead, we spend all that mental energy on imagining worst case scenarios, or we get pulled into the quicksand of refreshing apps on our phones that we just checked 5 minutes ago. Why? Because with just a few exceptions, most news unfolds pretty slowly. Even big news is usually slow moving, and we want it to go faster. We want to know how the story turns out. The problem is that most of the time when we're refreshing these apps, the news hasn't changed at all. We're just getting pulled into more exhausting and clickbaity discussions of the same news. Our brains are not equipped for a 24-hour-a-day information cycle. Yes, you want to be informed and involved. But also yes, shoving infinite hot takes directly through your eyeballs and into your brain can drive you insane without accomplishing anything. It's also not a great fit for the day-to-day tasks of being a teacher, like convincing a class full of reluctant kids to practice their multiplication tables. It's not a great fit for finding out half the class didn't do their homework. It's not a great fit for when a kid wants to argue with you about whether they were talking, which means they are still talking. What I'm saying is that teaching is an emotional energy marathon. And in a marathon, it doesn't matter how good a runner you are if you let yourself get dehydrated. As a teacher, if your emotional rubber band is getting stretched to its breaking point by non-teaching issues, you're much more likely to snap by the end of the school day. To keep an uncertain situation from driving you completely nuts, the first step is to recognize it as an uncertain situation that could drive you completely nuts. Then take conscious steps to protect your emotional energy. What does that mean? Mute some of your group chats. You know which ones. Turn off the alerts on all your news apps. A lot of times, these apps will send you breaking news alerts when it's really not breaking news. It's a new opinion piece that they just published with a new twist on the news. And finally, consider taking social media apps off your phone completely. The whole business model of social media is based on harvesting our emotional energy to sell to advertisers. And the feelings that keep you most glued to social media are the exact feelings you don't want to be feeling all day. These include outrage, envy, or more important in this case, a sense of impending doom. That sense that something terrible is about to happen hooks right into that part of your brain that has trouble handling uncertainty and feels this compulsive need to feel prepared. Pulling you back into app refreshing quicksand is the way that social media companies win. And when social media companies win that battle, you are on the losing end, because you needed that sanity for other parts of your life. And every time you check your phone, it's a chance for you to be emotionally blindsided. Your phone vibrates and it's like, hey friend, things are much, much worse than you thought. Turns out you were worrying too little. Enjoy that after lunch class. This is what it feels like when you're stuck in the hot take zone of the internet, and you need a way to pull yourself out of the hot take zone. One thing that can sometimes help is to try to zoom out to a more historical perspective. Teaching is one of the world's oldest professions, and there have been so many tough moments in history, and in every one of those moments, teachers still had to go in and do their jobs. Whatever challenges this year brings, there are teachers out there somewhere who will rise to meet them, whatever that means in the moment. And you can strive to be one of those teachers. Well, okay, but how do you do that? Here's one possibility. You zoomed out to historical perspective. Now try zooming way back in, not just to your job description, but even farther than that. Narrow down to a tiny little focal point, one small project in one small time frame. Sometimes you need something where you can say, I am focusing all my attention on this right now, this one little thing that I hope will be helpful to someone else. And sometimes teaching can offer you that focal point. When the world around you feels overwhelming and completely out of your control, teaching can be a little piece of the world that you actually are in charge of. It is not such a bad thing to convince yourself that your job is important enough that you can block out the rest of the world and focus on giving your students the best education you can give them for one day, or even for the next 45 minutes. And you know what? You might not be wrong. If you'd like more information about my course on managing your emotional rubber band, or if you want to download a free classroom management troubleshooting guide, you'll find the links to both of those in the description underneath this video. Thanks for watching. You got this.